once upon a time, this would have been front page news because we are on the brink of a major war in East Asia, of which nobody apparently appears to be taking very seriously because it would just be inconvenient for everybody's picture of the global narrative. So let's go ahead and put up the next one on the screen from part 2, please, the Reuters tear sheet about North Korea. This is very important. North Korea has fired 23 missiles, with one landing off the South Korean coast for the first time ever. This comes from a slew of different missile launches by the North Koreans, both towards the Japanese, towards South Korean waters, in a response to South Korean military drills with the United States, and spawning major panic in Japan, Krystal. They did overflies of Japan for the second time since 2017. Can you imagine watching television, evening television, and the emergency system? You know, whenever there's like a flood warning on your phone, imagine it says, missile incoming, take shelter now. That is what our Japanese allies are dealing with on a daily basis now. And this is a real bad situation. Because right now, the South Koreans, let's go and put this up there, have fired 3 air-to-ground missiles from warplanes into the sea north of the disputed border, on top of U.S. military exercises, which are happening. So why does this matter in the context of what we were just talking about in Ukraine at all? Well, Donald Trump, I believe, made one of the most significant diplomatic breakthroughs of all time in modern U.S. history, whenever he said, screw it. I'm meeting with Kim Jong-un with 0 preconditions, because the other option was war. That doesn't sound very good. From everything I have read, the North Koreans have a major stockpile of horrific chemical weapons, VX, sarin gas, on top of massive ammunition stockpile. They could level the city of Seoul in like 45 minutes. Like, it would be horrific. I mean, tens of millions of people would die, on top of tens of thousands of American soldiers.
Something like 2/3 of the South Korean population lives in Seoul. It's
within
heavily
45 minutes of the DMZ. We also have tens of thousands of troops, American soldiers, who are on, I think it's Osan Air Force Base, and others, whose basically their job is to die in the middle of one of these conflicts. That's how grave the military plans for all of this look like. Well, we had 2 options in 2017. Kim Jong-un is not giving up his nuclear program. He's not going to stop firing missiles because he wants entry into the global economy because his country is suffering, mostly because of him, but he wants access to global markets and end of sanctions. So he's willing to go all in and risk war for that. We had to decide, well, do we want the Korean Peninsula to be wiped off the face of the earth, or should we just try and put an end to this thing, this madness? Trump went to go meet with him. At the total, he was hailed as like legitimizing this dictator.
Yeah.
He was said to be abandoning the long-standing U.S. position that we must have denuclearization as a pretext for talks. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to go and meet with the guy. And guess what? They didn't do anything for 5 years. And it was great. It was actually very nice to not have random ballistic missiles flying into the sea in East Asia, which could even, one issue is that they fire these missiles into the air and they don't give any heads up to like commercial airline pilots.
Oh my God.
So there's a real fear that they can just shoot a plane out of the sky accidentally. Very real consequences. The point is that Trump bucked the Washington establishment by saying, no, I'm just going to meet with them. And also, even though he ended up also not dropping denuclearization from the demand of North Korea, we got them talking. They were exchanging letters. Mike Pompeo was over there all the time. And we were presenting the North Koreans. We're like, hey, look, you can have a great life if you guys give up your nukes. Now, ultimately, I personally think that's just not on the table at all. They would personally, like, if I were them, I would never give it up. As they always say in their negotiations, look what happened to Gaddafi.
Libya.
Yeah, they're like, you guys, he died with a ramrod up his ass. He's like, that's not going to happen to me. So that's something that they are wholly wedded to. The point is that this shows you, because the Biden administration immediately reverted back to the Obama position, which is, no, we're not going to talk to them at all, and it's up to them whether they want to start a war or not.
Yeah.
This demonstrates the power and lasting legacy of diplomacy. We had 5 years of relative peace in East Asia, even though nothing happened. And all talking was all that happened.
It also shows you, Americans have a finite ability to consume news. Mm-hmm. There's a finite ability of the news media to, focus in on any particular story. And, they're all consumed with the Ukraine war. It's a very important story. We're very consumed with it as well, possibility of nuclear war. But don't forget that we have other incredibly dangerous, volatile situations unfolding with North Korea, Taiwan, other places. And, we don't want to let that fall off the table. When Obama handed off to Trump, that was the thing that he said he thought would be the biggest threat, the largest danger, the most sort of like consuming issue on the international stage. So, that has not gone away. And even after those first 23 missiles, and then South Korea does their, sort of retaliation, North Korea continued then afterwards and launched 4 more, including an ICBM, which they say that test failed, but, further escalating even after the initial launch of those 23 missiles. So it's a very, very dangerous situation.
And look, maybe I'll say something controversial, which will piss off a lot of the Euros that watch our show. Japan and South Korea are 15,000 times more valuable to the U.S. economy, to the U.S. way of life, and as allies than any place in Eastern Europe. And I know it's difficult to talk that way, but just look at a chart of global GDP and look at trading relationships, longtime alliances, military spending, commitment actually to the U.S. military alliance, to the U.S. way of life, the U.S. global order, vis-a-vis China. Asia is, look, 50-something% of world GDP. And I think there's a real chauvinism, the way that we talk about allies and the way that we look at the world, considering how important this part of the world is. Maybe just because we don't have ancestry. Maybe I'm Indian, so I just don't have the European ancestry, so I'm willing to look at it like on a balance sheet. Any war in East Asia would be 10 to 15 to 25 times more impactful on U.S. interests than anything that is going on right now in Ukraine. And part of the issue, as I'm always worried about, is that we are blowing our wad on terms of our military industrial complex, in terms of our supplies, in terms of our just energy, our attention.
Public will.
While there is, public will. While there is a real possibility of a war which could end the American way of life as we know it. Already, China's zero COVID lockdowns are making it so that the new iPhone 14 is not going to get delivered, on time.
This is outrageous.
I really believe that people should understand, like, if there's a war over Taiwan or in East Asia, this will be the last iPhone that you ever have. And you'll likely have to turn it into the government because they need the chips that are inside of it. So, look, it's a serious situation. We can learn. We had a 5-year reprieve from over 70 years of war or tensions on the Korean Peninsula. And it came from just talking between 2 leaders and having high-level conversations. And it led to extraordinary results. The South Korean president goes to North Korea, does the handshake. It's never happened before. It's like we were on the path to a good outcome. And instead, the Biden administration reverted back to the brain-dead policy of we're going to insist a country with the capability, or we're going to insist that a country with the capability to nuke us should give up their nukes. Why would they do that?
These past several years have really exposed how so much of what is taken for granted as like foreign policy conventional wisdom in the blob was not just like, it was just completely wrong. It was like total opposite of what you should be doing. I mean, our sanction policy with regard to Russia, how is that? Where has that curbed their appetite for war? Has that even
talking about nukes?
Yeah, exactly. So there's been a lot of potential learning, but unfortunately the foreign policy establishment doesn't seem to want to learn those lessons.
No, they don't want to learn it at all.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.